A very good evening. A warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, and to the eagle-eyed amongst you. Welcome back to a venue you might recognize from a year ago when I did the show, around about exactly a year from this very room. This is the Oinoscent Wine Bar's cellar, sitting just below one of the most charming wine bars, not just in Greece, but anywhere that I've been on my wine travels. A place that doesn't just celebrate Greek wine and the rise thereof, but also one that celebrates wine from all over the world. In fact, sitting just to my left, a few bottles of Kershaw Chardonnay. Above them, some Soldat, some Trainspur from Ibn Sadi. Just over my shoulder, some Molyneux, some Le Passant, some Buchenholzklub. Sitting over there in the corner, there's a bit of Southern Rite and some Canon Cop Cadet. And in fact, there's also some wine sitting beside me. The wine we drank on the show last year, Ian Nodier's Lampard, the Colombard, which makes for a striking partner to the wine I am drinking, the Vasaltis from Santorini, the Acertico, which I've actually got in my glass at the moment. And it's taking the sting out of a chilly day in Athens. It got down to about 34 degrees at one point. It's not quite the heat wave of a month ago, but it is certainly very, very warm, happily so, and ideal for some Acertico. So welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. And Norman Goodfellows has a particular ring because one of the terribly important people at the Norman Goodfellows team is part of today's show. As I said to the guests just before we came on air, I'm always a little hesitant about doing a show that's linked to Women's Day or to Women's Month. It's very easy to run into patronizing territory and to pay tribute from the wrong point of departure. But what I wanted to do very simply was take three people who just also happen to be women who are excelling in different areas of the South African wine industry, find out how they're doing and where we've gone right, but where we still have a little bit of work to do in the South African wine industry, but also to find out how in their three respective roles, one of them retail, one of them the the godmother of South African wine, I think, and the other one of my favorite winemakers. She's completely mad in the cellar and wonderfully so. So in just a moment, Siobhan Thompson, the CEO of Wines of South Africa, Mbali Zondo, who's the marketing director at Norman Goodfellows, and Izele van Blerk from KWV's The Mentors will be joining me to talk wine, talk the wine industry, and have a glass or two of wine. In the case of Izele, probably 5 or 6. That's coming in just a second. Before we do that, though, from today's live show from Greece, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows, let's have a quick look at some wine news. So 24 hours to go or thereabouts if you want to join this. This is the Upper Union restaurant a couple of times and had a really, really good time when I've been there. It's just a fantastic restaurant and it's a restaurant that's full of excitement. And a big part of that is the chef in question. Now, it was Joanne Smith who introduced me to not just this restaurant, but also to Chef Amori. And she is going to be on hand tomorrow night in partnership with Aaron's Family Wines. It is 6:30 tomorrow night, and it is your chance to run through a 5-course menu paired with wine, 950 Rand. I'll tell you what, after 4 weeks in Europe, 950 Rand is about the cost of a sandwich, let alone a 5-course dinner with wine. Amori's making some terrific food. The Aaron's Family Wines are excellent. The combination is one that makes tomorrow night a very, very good bet. So get down to the Upper Union Restaurant's website, book your tickets, and get those last few seats available for tomorrow. Then some good news for Strauss. We do a lot with Strauss, particularly with the Dan Really Likes Wine charity auction. And look out for news on that coming up next week. Katiwa McLean and Joanne Strauss, very dear friend of mine, Joanne, both joined the Strauss team on the board, appropriate given Joanne's surname. So we're part of the team. Frank Kilbourne, the chairman, announcing that news earlier on today. Katiwa from the mining industry has got a long-held passion for the art world and the artists who make up a very bright and vibrant South African industry. And Joanne, not just a wine lover, but also been doing a lot with art over the last couple of years. but I think they'll also have a bit of a role in the wine side of the business, which is obviously far more important than the art side. So congratulations, Katiwa and Joanne, and well done, Strauss, 2 fine additions. And then this is coming up next week, Creators Dinner with Steenberg, Cellar Master Ilunda Basson, and Chef Kerry Gilpin, going to be joined by some very special guests. The food down at Steenberg is consistently excellent, so too is the wine. And so I will be looking out for feedback on that particular evening, not just because of the food and wine, though, but also because of the guests. Crystal Birch from the Hat Factory will be there, Banola Kavula, top local artist, as well as Kelly and Bettina from Me and B, the fashion brand, and they'll be pairing up with Kerry, with Ilunda, and that is 750 Rand per person. 50 Rand of that goes to Taking Care of Business platform. It's a lovely venue, some really cool people, and a great night. So put that one in your diary for next week if you are available. Okay, well, let's jump back into the cellar. Now, straight above me is the Oinoscent Wine Bar, and I'll try and fire some photos into the show a little bit later. I was here on Saturday. We had a lovely evening drinking some wine with a difference. We had some Vidiano, which is a grape from Crete. You might remember we featured some of that on the show last year with the Darakis family vineyards. It's got a beautiful layered intensity, wonderfully textured white wine, and it's one that I think we're going to be hearing a lot more of in the wine world. On its own, it's delightful, but with food, it really roars into its own and makes something delightful. And then what we also had, which was fantastic, was some aged Assyrtikos, 9-year-old Assyrtiko from Hatzidarkis, which is one of the great names of Santorini Assyrtiko production. Because of that freshness, that steely minerality, that swept in from the ocean feel that Assyrtiko has, and there's often that Sauvignon Blanc thinking, yes, well, this is a wine to drink fairly young, and it certainly has great merit in doing so, although not immediately, give it at least a year or two. But we went back 9 years. The color, understandably, had changed, become a lot more golden, a lot more intense, but the wine as a whole had just developed this robust intensity of flavor that was an utter delight. We had a whole pile of Greek cheeses with it, and it was a real joy. Also had some Robola from Kefalonia, from Gentilinis. Gentilinis was on the show last year, an Australian-run winery, in that it's a Greek-Australian winemaker. But again, some terrific wine. So it's a wonderful place to come to that has a love of all manner of wine, and not just Greek. They've got plenty of South African, which is why I thought it was a perfect place to welcome 3 very special South African guests onto the show as we kick off another week of Dan Really Likes Wine. And my guests, just to remind you, are Siobhan Thompson, the CEO of Wines of South Africa, and Mbali Zondo from Norman Goodfellows, Marketing Director and Head of Tasting. I think that's an unofficial title. And Izele van Blerk from KWV The Mentors. Guys, welcome. Lovely to have you all back on Dan Really Likes Wine, and welcome to the show. Labour through another tough month in Greece, discovering all manner of wonderful wine, and thinking a lot, Siobhan, about what Greece is doing in comparison to what South Africa is doing. Because I remember last year writing a couple of articles about how, for me, Greece and South Africa were my 2 most exciting wine countries in the world. South Africa, I think, a lot more established in terms of a global footprint. Greece with this wonderful history, lots of grapes of its own, and now making a lot of those grapes from the varietals that Greece calls home, and watching how they're developing and starting to move into the international market. So I'm going to ask you for some advice for the Greek wine industry a little later on in the show in terms of how they might be able to learn from some of the things that we have done. But I would like to kick off with a bit of a report card, because we haven't seen you on the show for a little while. I think it's been a good few months, halfway in and a little more to 2023. How healthy does Siobhan Thompson feel the South African wine industry is at the moment?
I'm ready for a holiday, Dan. I'm coming to join you in Greece. 2023 has been a challenging year, and I think not because of South African wine per se, but because of the globe. There's a lot of economic pressure on consumers around the world, and you're not seeing that in one market, you're seeing it in plenty of the markets. And I think consumers have stopped drinking they're drinking less, shall I say. They haven't stopped drinking. They're drinking a lot less. They're looking for quality, which is the good news. So they're buying up, but they're buying less. And we are seeing that in our export figures. We've seen a bit of a drop in our export figures when it comes to volume, but we've seen that the value is holding steady, which really shows that people are buying up and drinking probably higher quality wine. So it's been a challenging year. I think it'll probably get better, though, towards the end of the year or hopefully the beginning of next year.
I think we just lost Siobhan for a second there. We'll jump back on in a moment. It's good to hear that there is hopefully some better news later on this year. I do have some more questions along those lines, but while we get Siobhan back, let's jump across to Mbali. One or two challenges for South African wine around the world. What's the Norman Goodfellows viewpoint domestically? Are people buying plenty of wine, buying more wine, buying different wine? What's the picture we paint of South African wine in South Africa at the moment, Mbali?
Hi, Dan. Thank you so much for having me on the show today. Well, from a South African perspective, the biggest challenge that we're facing as a company within the alcohol industry, both in the wine category and other alcohol categories, is the economic pinch. So the economic and financial pinch. People are very interested in new wines. People are very interested in the quality of wine, but a lot of people are just, to Siobhan's point, drinking a little bit less, or when they do have the ability to purchase some quality wines, they're not sure, and so they stick to what they know. So I really do think that there is more of an opportunity to marry education with the current economic pinch that people are feeling in their pockets right now. And at the end of the day, when you get to month end, it's always a case of, do I go and buy a case of wine, or do I go and prioritize and go pay, X sets of bills? So it's a challenging one because the demand is there. As South Africans, we are a drinking nation, but we have seen that a lot of people are slightly scared to explore outside of the norm of what they deem to be comfortable. And so the exploration, goes down and the spontaneity goes down, but definitely, alcohol sales are still there. It's just that people are now opting for what they know because they know exactly that, for example, $200 will get me X, and I know what I'm getting for my 200 Rand.
What about the kind of the education of the South African wine consumer? Yes, we know people are a little tighter financially, and they have to be a little more careful with what they're buying. But is that leading to people spending more time researching, digging up, finding out a bit more about what's available, and looking to stretch the value for money by understanding where that value is to be found, rather than simply dropping the price because the price is cheaper?
So absolutely, Dan. It shows like yours. It's industry trade shows that we have. It's some of the tasting events that we have at our four-way store and in any of our other Norman Goodfellows store, where we are trying to make an intentional impact in trying to bridge that gap from an education perspective. These events collectively, in their own right, give off information, and someone, yes, necessarily might not buy on the night or might not buy after they've watched an episode of Dan Really Likes Wine, but that information or that seed of education has been planted, and that then starts changing behavior and adds to an element of curiosity, and curiosity leads to exploration, and exploration then will definitely change the framing of wine, particularly when it comes to value add versus cost.
See a comment Siobhan has just sent me backing up exactly that. I'll come back to with a similar question in a moment. What about Mbali, the wines that people are drinking specifically? What are you seeing moving off the shelves? What are the trends amongst South African wine drinkers at the moment, other than simply price?
Other than simply price, Dan, we have seen a huge encouragement and motivation towards local is lekker, buying our locally made wines. We as a country, as a nation, are competing globally. So our wines are on global stages. And so we have the luxury of having the wine world just in our backyards in areas like, Stellenbosch, Paarl, Swartland areas, for example. So all of these areas are literally at our backyard, and we can easily access them, and it's something that we need to be proud of, and it's something that a lot of people are trying to spread the word and encourage, if they've got family or friends overseas, that when they are in South Africa, to visit these places. So us as South Africans, we definitely love our wine, and it's definitely an improvement from a perspective of buying local wines and locally made wines in different regions.
That is good to hear, and Mbali is a big part of driving that particular love and engagement with local wine. Let's find out from the person who actually makes the wine how things are looking. Izele, I always love having you on the show, both because you're great fun, but also you make such cool and interesting wine. What has 2023 been like for Team Izele and KWV's The Mentors brand? Oh, I think we've just got you on mute there, Izele.
I'm muted. Sorry. It's an extra sip of wine that muted me. Thank you. I said thank you for having us again on the show. It's always a pleasure. It's always fun. I just packed my bags. I'm off to Germany tomorrow, flying the South African flag high. We are 2 South Africans going to judge Mundusvini, but getting back to 2023, it's been a difficult harvest. Really, it's been a challenge. But looking at the wines now, it's looking exceptional. I think always wine is, give it a bit of time. We need time to mature in our wine journey. So wine also need a bit of time. I was listening now to what everyone's been saying, and it's, for me as a winemaker, I sit almost at the backseat of the cinema and looking at the show, and then I just say, yes, it is. It's been a difficult year. It's been, if you look at wine sales, if you look at talking about educating people, and for me personally, it's like focusing on certain varietals, educate the people on your everyday standard varietals like Sauvignon Blanc, Chenin, Chardonnay. If you travel to African countries like Kenya, Tanzania, we need to educate the people on what is wine, what is Sauvignon Blanc, what is Chenin. And in my world, it's really focusing on niche varietals like Nebbiolo, Tempranillo, Carignan, Mourvedre, Sangiovese, all of those niche varietals. But for me personally, understanding a Malbec from Paarl region, how's this going to taste? And a Malbec from Stellenbosch from 500 meters above sea level, and then 10 meters above sea level. And it's wine is so interesting. And I always say to the people when I present a tasting is, wine is really intimidating, and we need to change that. If we can change the perception of wine as it's really intimidating, because if you taste a beer, no one goes and say, oh, do you smell this? Or do you smell that? No, but wine people do that. And I think we need to get people to appreciate wine, understand wine, and say, it's actually so enjoyable, and it's a product of nature. I can go on with beers and wines, but it's really we need to get people to understand what we actually crafting with our hands. And that South Africa actually have the best wines in the world. And I'm going to say it again. We have the best wines in the world.
And you are responsible for several of them, Izele, as I've discovered on many, many occasions. And what you do as a winemaker that makes you just so much fun to share wine with links directly to what both Siobhan and Mbali have already said in terms of that education of people, that learning process that wine offers us, in that you have so much fun finding wine that's quite often away from the beaten track, stuff that people don't know, don't recognize, and you pull in a Carmenere here or a Pinot Gris there, or stuff that's a little bit unusual, and you have so much fun with it. And you've been able to now, with this Mentors brand, give us not just, I think, a great collection of wine, but also give us great insight into the sheer variety of wine that South Africa has the ability to not just make, but to make really well.
Yes, Dan, and it's interesting. We were talking before the show about my suitcase is packed with first layer of wine. I hope no one on the airport's listening now, but the first layer of wine or of my suitcase is actually South African wines, and I actually selected wines to show the people in Germany, like Grenache Blanc. We've got Petit Verdot, we've got Cabernet Franc, we've got interesting Malbecs, we've got Nebbiolo. Then also taking it to our own brand like K Blends, Pinotage-driven blends. But I don't even want to say K Blend because it's icon wines, and we can actually compete with the best in the world. But it's bringing something different to people and educating them. Taking a Pinotage, opening a bottle of Pinotage to more than 100 judges from all over the world, letting them taste it and say, listen here, this is the evolution of Pinotage in South Africa. It's almost going to the Pinot Noir style or Cinsault style. And it's really exciting to look at our wines. And for me, even making wine for 13 years, it's been a journey. When I think about things that I've done 13 years ago, I think like, oh my goodness, how could you put the wine in the bottle? But now it's like, okay, every time you're still learning, you're still understanding and tasting other people's wine and understanding the whole concept of wine and what we're doing and understanding different sites, working with our viticultural team and the winemaking team, the mentors team in the cellar. It was so interesting. The Young Wine Show was hosted last week, and it's so great seeing the team when we took the Malbec. We won the Wooded Malbec trophy, and taking that trophy this morning to the team, I was like, oh, it's Monday morning, it's a long week, and everyone was just smiling. And it's a really unique Malbec from Paul region. It's a minty Malbec, and that is so different, so unique. And I think we've got the most beautiful wines, and to educate people on that, it's for me, I get goosebumps. There's so much to learn. Like I said, I still have 30 years of winemaking, maybe 28 years of winemaking left. But I think I could make wine for another 100 years and won't understand 10% of the wine industry and the opportunities that we have. And I see a comment now from Siobhan about liquid on lips is the most important thing that we can do. Every time people taste our wines, they suddenly realize that, wow, it's exceptional. And we need to change the perception of good value for money. It's exceptional value for money. We actually need to go, okay, now we're going to be 50 pounds a bottle or 70 euros a bottle, because that's the quality that we actually produce.
It leads nicely back to Siobhan. Before I jump across, a comment from Andrew Woolgar, regular guest and a very regular viewer of the show. Hey, Dan, as a 100% South African wine importer here in North Carolina, from my perspective, the year's been almost impossible to predict sales. We've still suffered some delays with shipping, and that affects us as a small company, but the unpredictability has not slowed any progress when it comes to diversifying my portfolio and shipping a container every 6 to 8 weeks. We're approaching Q4, so I expect sales to jump and help us to recover. And you did mention before I lost you a moment ago, Siobhan, that you were expecting some good news for later on this year. That will probably tie in with what is a constant journey of South African wine, and that is the education that Mbali and Izele have also spoken to, and that's pretty much at the forefront of what you're doing, really, as well as getting people to understand South African wine by getting people to try South African wine.
Yeah, Dan, I'm always optimistic. So I always say my glass is 3/4 full and never empty. So, for me, it's been a hard sort of start to the year, and the type of things that I've mentioned, shipping issues, that still continues. But I do feel that the tide will turn, and there's a lot of positivity out there for South African wine. But for me, it's key to get, as Izele said, liquid on lips. The minute you go and create an audience with South African wine, get them to taste the wine, get the story going, people are fascinated. There's so much to discover about South African wine. There's so much innovation. So I do feel that maybe towards the end of the year, and particularly going into the year, and I hope we're going to have a good harvest after all the great rain that we've had. So let's hope that towards the end of the year, as people settle into a sort of a newer way of life, having less money in their purse, shall we say, and they start discovering better wines out there made from in South Africa, coming into the market, that they'll start tasting our wines and drinking them. I was in the States, for instance, in June, July, and I went into a restaurant in Washington, D.C., and I was blown away that we had 10 wines on the list. I've never seen that before. So, you do find these gems, and you get people tasting the wine, and they get excited about it. And they love hearing the stories about the winemakers, the wine, where it comes from, how it's made. I think Shinnen's doing a lot for us as well. It's really creating a buzz, and I think sort of built on top of that is the old vine Shinnen. But I just want to go back to that idea of education. For me, it's layers. You almost build up education in layers. So you start with those simple things, and I think it is important to demystify and make wine a lot more accessible. People are scared to try it. They don't understand all these big terms. They don't understand all the different cultivars. Demystify it. We go into Africa, we do a lot of training, but we'll fill glasses with different sort of coffee beans or put it strawberries and get people to smell that and say, okay, what do you see? What do you smell coming through? And let them make their own decision. And it's incredible to see the want for education and the buy-in to it once they understand the simple things.
That African market is one that we've chatted on this show with not just you, but a number of your colleagues for a few times. And I know it has its logistical challenges, but it does seem to be gaining traction, not just in terms of finding new markets, but finding people in those markets and persuading them that wine is an important addition to a lifestyle. How much have we progressed over the last year or so within that African market?
Dan, we're definitely making progress. I think the most important to understand about the African continent is wine is pretty new to most Africans, put it that way, and including South Africans. They haven't been traditional wine drinkers. And you find that in many markets like the African markets, even in Asia, where consumers are getting exposure to wine, they'll slowly start adopting it. I think wine has is a very prestigious product. So what we find in Africa, in African countries that we go to, is there's a lot of excitement about it. When we have tastings or functions, people dress up, they come to the event, they ask a lot of questions. If we have training, we'll provide seats for 50 people and 100 will appear. It's amazing. There's such a draw card to wine, and I'm seeing that progress starting to happen. And people are going from drinking, for instance, let's say sweeter wines to slightly drier wines. We're seeing that movement of red wines into white wines. So it is happening. I think it's a very similar trend in South Africa. It will take time, it will take investment, and you have to, all I say is repeat. So go back, do more tastings, get producers to go in, and you'll see that adoption starting to happen.
A big part of what you do, and it applies to Mbali, it applies to Izele, it's the telling of stories. It's crucial to marketing, but so applicable to wine and how we get wine out there, not just what it tastes like or what we pick up in the nose, but what's the story behind that wine. And I think people are a lot more conscious of a lot of elements going into wine, be they environmental, be they the background, or be they who's making the wine, which leads us to the question of women in wine. It's a month where there's been a very strong focus in pretty much every industry in South Africa on women in wine in South Africa. Where do we sit on a broad report card? What are we doing right? Where do we need a little bit more work?
So Dan, I get asked many times, how many women work in the wine industry? And I don't have an answer. I've been at Woza for 10 years, and prior to that, I was in the wine industry, and I've seen more and more women entering at all different levels of the value chain in wine. And for me, that's very, very exciting. And people like to hear about the stories around the women involved. I think they like to hear the stories about everyone involved in wine. So I'm not going to just single out women. But for me, it is exciting to see younger women coming in, a lot more female winemakers, young, passionate girls, saying, oh, I want to be a winemaker. So I've seen some really good protégés come through. And for me, it is great to see that. I never want to sit here and say, oh, single out woman. I don't like that. I think everyone should have an opportunity, but it is nice to see a balance starting to happen. And I think women bring a different aspect to men. And I think that's great because the two will really balance each other. But I am so excited about some of the young girls ladies, shall I say, coming in, of color particularly, and how they're being mentored in the industry, and how they're starting to rise to senior levels. It really is very heartening.
Izele, what's your take there? Because you've been true to the name of your brand. You've been a wonderful mentor to many people, either officially within the cellar, or I know there are loads of winemakers, irrespective of gender, who lean on you for advice, for guidance, for a bit of counsel. If you take your point of departure when you arrived in the wine industry to where you are now, how far have we come in terms of women in the wine industry, and how far do you feel we still have to go?
Yeah, Dan, it's been a journey over the last 13 years, and but interesting story is I've been chairman for Chardonnay at Veritas and Young Wine Show for the past 10 years. You got 3 years, and then you're off for 3 years, and then you get elected again. But this year it was a very interesting year of judging. We had 5 judges on the panel, and we were 4 girls and 1 guy on the Chardonnay panel. And it was so diverse, it was multiracial, and it was exceptional. And we had a protege girl on the panel, and I was, after the tasting, I actually wanted to say, can I please appoint you as my assistant winemaker? Because it's so heartwarming that there's so much talent out there, and sometimes we just miss it. And I must say, it was, for me, over the past 10 years, we've grown, because I'm currently still on the senior winemakers, or on the management team at KWV. I'm the only female, and it's still, for me, it's a challenge, but you get to find out, and you know what to do and what to say, and it's promising seeing what's going on all around, and how the female winemakers are just going from strength to strength. But I'm always the one that says, male, female, really, you're a winemaker. For me, that's the most important thing. We all care about what we're doing, where we're going, and really it's just seeing the field has been equal now, and there's a lot of proteges coming through, and exceptional people. Like I said, judging on the Chardonnay panel this year, being the chairman, and I had exceptional tasters on the panel.
I see Marcel Nell is echoing the thoughts of many. Yeah, my favorite winemaker, Izele van Blerk. I think there are lots of people who have Izele top of the list. I'll put a similar question as we wrap up this particular discussion to you, Mbali. Young Black woman in the South African liquor industry, generally wine industry in particular, for this conversation. Is it a space that you feel is moving in the right direction? Is doing some of the right things, and where is more work still needed?
So Dan, absolutely. I think if you look at, you know, where we are now in 2023 versus where we were, let's say, in 1997, there is absolutely a lot of work that's been done. We're seeing a lot more names of women of color coming through. And I think for me, that shows the testament of how committed South Africans are to making sure that there's more diversity in the wine industry. And it shows the commitment of the wine farms themselves in making sure that they're part of the change. For me, Dan, I just think that in terms of areas of improvement, to Izele and Siobhan's point, absolutely diversity is amazing. We need both men and females because they both add a certain dynamic to the industry. But I think to Siobhan's point, there are so many other roles outside of winemaker that is just as important in the winemaking process. And I think we need to highlight those roles a little bit more, particularly when we are looking at, you know, upcoming ladies from, you know, maybe perhaps disadvantaged areas. They may not know that, hang on, actually, I could become a viticulturalist, you know. What is that? What does one do in that role? And we are so sort of siloed into thinking about a specific set of career roles, and I think we need to open it up a little bit and mention and name these other roles that are available in the wine industry. And just from a mentorship perspective, I think there's so much work that's been done, and we are definitely way ahead of other, if not the only African country. So I think there's definitely something to be proud of there.
That's a great sentiment to be able to share. What about from a marketing perspective? How much does gender dynamic influence how you approach the marketing of wine through Norman Goodfellows based on who's buying wine, what kind of wine they're buying? How has that over the last few years shifted your approach to engaging with your range of consumers?
So absolutely, Dan, from my perspective, it's taught me not to silo or isolate certain people into specific stereotypes or specific, you know, roles. And, you know, consumers will surprise you, particularly as we have had more, you know, there was a mention of liquid to lips. We as a company are a firm believer in liquid to lips. We encourage that all the time in all our stores. And we find that, you know, there is just so much curiosity coming from both men and women, particularly people of color. And for me personally, I come from a background where traditionally alcohol was, you know, seen negatively. And now that I'm in the industry and a Black female, I'm actually teaching my mom how to view wine in a positive light, that you can pair wine and still be a productive, positive human being in the society. And we don't have to have this negative connotation when it comes to alcohol. So for me, I've been part of the change, not only personally from a family perspective, but also just, you know, within our office internally and in our internal teams. It's just breaking that stereotype bit by bit and showing people that actually, you know what, you can have access to wine. Yes, the education has many avenues and dips and turns, but that's the beauty of it, that there isn't just one storyline to follow when it comes to wine.
I might risk throwing your mum under the bus here, but has this not had a negative side in that she keeps stealing your very best wine?
Absolutely, Dan. I keep a selection of, you know, some of my favorite wines and some wines that I actually want to try because I've, you know, seen a recommendation, read a review, and my mother has just, you know, taken the wild side of exploration and has really opened up to trying wine. And sometimes I see certain bottles missing, then I know she's taken it. But absolutely, she's warmed up to the positive sides of wine and the education aspects and just the sheer opportunities that are involved in the wine industry.
Good for you, Mbali's mum. I see Siobhan Breyfrunnevold is watching the show, loving your opinion on wine as part of a lifestyle, and it is an education. So lovely to have you watching the show. I mentioned Marcel said that Izele was her favorite winemaker. Looks like Monique is part of the fan club as well. Monique Erlang, and mine, Marcel, and mine. That is a very, very long list indeed. Well, let's go back to the winemaker. Tell us, first of all, I know you mentioned at the top of the show, it just sounds really exciting. Flag is packed, suitcase full of largely illegal quantities of wine, and ready to head off to Germany. What exactly will you be doing? How did this come about? And what does the next week or so hold for you, Izele?
I just started laughing now because I can correlate with what you said now about your mother drinking all the good wines and all of that. It's like walking into the house in the evening and she's drinking a different wine, and then I go, okay, I'm going to open a bottle of Mentors, and then she's like, okay, you need to take my glass of wine now because I want to drink that what you're opening now. So it's really about education and giving them the opportunity to drink drink good wine, but experience different tastes, different understandings. And we sometimes spoil people with the knowledge and with the taste and with what we have to present. So yeah, I'm packed. I'm very excited. It's the second time I've been invited to judge at Mundus Vini, one of the biggest wine competitions in the world. They get about 20,000 entries every year for the competition, and we are 102 judges from all over the world, only 2 South Africans. So yeah, myself and Edmund, the Salamaster at Lamott, is flying tomorrow, and yeah, it's so exciting. We fly there, you get 10 wines in front of you. It's so different than the South African wine competitions because you've got in South Africa we pour 10 wines at a time. In Germany, they pour 1 wine at a time, and you rate every single wine on its own. And it's about 6 to 8 judges from all over the world on one panel. And you get a flight of, today I will taste New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs. Then the next 10 wines will be Australian Shirazes. Then the next 10 wines will be fortified wines, ports from Portugal. So you taste about 40 to 50 wines per day, but 10 wines at a time, 1 wine at a time, but 10 wines in a flight. And then it's exceptional. I mentioned to them prior to the show that the people that you judge with there, it's like they in the next level of wine. Last year, you mentioned a few varietals that I didn't know. And I was like, last year at the judging at Mundus Vini, I said, well, I don't know this varietal. I've never tasted it in my life. So they stopped. For 10 minutes, they told me, this is what you need to taste. This is where it's from. This is how you make it. And it's exceptional. Just educating me as a winemaker that have never tasted these specific varietals. And when we get to a South African varietal, when we get to Pinotage or Sauvignon Blanc from South Africa, I will say, well, let's talk about it for 10 minutes and explain how does a South African Pinotage taste? What's the crossing? What's the winemaking technique? So what do you need to taste in the specific wine? So it's exciting. It's last year when I went there the first time, I said it was my best learning of all the 10 years I've been making wine, meeting 100 different people from different countries, talking just about wine, about sales, what we need to do different, all the wine stories, what works, people from wine magazines, winemakers from Portugal, Spain, Italy, and just wine experts. And it's just the best opportunity. And I'm very privileged to join the team and to have 4 days of really good wine tasting. Hopefully I get to taste a lot of South African wine so I can score it 98 or 100. But yeah.
It's impossible not to get excited about wine when chatting to Izele. She is infectious with her enthusiasm, which makes her, Siobhan, such a wonderful ambassador for South African wine. She's not alone, though. We've got some extraordinary people, both sending our wine out into the world, but also on the ground, having an impact with South African wine all over the world. Where for us South African producers, are we getting things really right? And where do you think, as a country, as a nation of wine producers, we perhaps need to do a little bit more work?
Dan, it's so interesting. I think we're getting so much right. One of the things that I've seen recently is, going to the US and being in Europe in March. We are really not confident about owning the good things. And we really are doing well. I think it's sad that the economies around the world are the way they are now, because I think we'd be flying otherwise. So I think we're really making very good progress with our quality. Our confidence is coming up, but we need to be far more confident. I think our wines are still underpriced because, we've got this legacy, which I absolutely hate. It annoys me because we need, Izele said, we are the best. I agree, we are the best, Izele. And she's so passionate about it. So I think we're making good quality wine. We're starting to get known for certain cultivars, for instance, Chenin, our Sauvignon Blancs, we're winning great awards. Our pinotages are starting to sort of make their own way in the world now. I think for us, the biggest challenge going forward is to get the world to recognize us and the quality that we have, and that we are as good as anyone else, if not better, and start paying us for that wine. I think it doesn't help us that we are so dislocated, a bit like Australia is from Europe, and the Americas, that our wine has to travel a long way. And I saw the comment earlier on saying how long people have to wait to get our orders. So sometimes that is a challenge for us, but I think that's a challenge faced by our competitors as well. But for me, it's really about becoming more confident in what we do and owning it. I've just seen recently on our sustainability efforts, we really are doing very, very well. When it comes to ethical trade, which has always been a little bit of a sort of sore point for South Africa, we've gone and we've got our own code, we've moved, we've really progressed in what we do in ethical trade. And we've got other countries coming to us and saying, well, what do you do? How do we approach this? Well, because they're starting to get pressure on ethical trade. And I sat back, in 2 months ago when I came across someone asking me for advice, and I said, we are really doing well on certain aspects, and we need to congratulate ourselves and become confident. So that for me is the biggest learning.
You talk about pricing. I look at my 3.5 weeks in Greece, where at most restaurants, you're finding a good, not a, oh my God, how was this made? Why have I never had it in my life? Full wine, but a good bottle of wine sitting in the 600 Rand plus space on a restaurant wine list. And I think what I could get for a similar price in South Africa, which is not knocking Greek wine at all. Greek wine has, for me, improved immeasurably. But it does just remind us what extraordinary value we do get in South Africa. Siobhan would like to see higher prices. Mbali generally would like lower prices to everybody at Norman Goodfellows. But in terms of your view of wine going forward, as somebody who's selling it not just out of your stores, but you shift so much wine to so many of South Africa's top restaurants, is it fair to say, Mbali, that by and large people are understanding more about South African wine, and in as much as their budgets allow, are willing to invest a bit more in wine when they can, because they do understand just how good it actually is?
Absolutely, Juan. Absolutely, Dan. You see, I've got one on my brain now. Yes, absolutely. Look, we cannot disregard the reality of the economic pinch, but I must say, Dan, over the sort of last few, particularly after COVID, actually, we have seen people demanding actually that quality, and once they do find that quality, are willing and able to save and then get what they want and not compromise. But for them, people are, particularly South Africans, are starting to put together that we are, spoiled for choice of absolutely amazing wines, like I said before, that are performing on global stages. So absolutely, we are seeing more and more people being open to making sure that, okay, if I can't afford it now, I will save up for it, but I want that. And sometimes they even call it by name or call it by brand. So it is something that is changing, but if it's something that they have tried and is worth the wait or is worth the purchase, they will purchase it.
Now, one of the most important things I think we need to do a lot of, and it's why I talk a lot about Greek wine. I love us having the opportunity to drink wine as South Africans from other parts of the world, be they Greece or France or America or Australia or wherever else wine is made, not instead of South African wine, but to complement, to increase our understanding, which leads me to an extension of the wine world. I believe you're having a little bit of a party tomorrow evening in Mbali, and people are welcome to come along and see the French having their best crack at making some decent brandy.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dan. So tomorrow we have a tasting at our four-way store, and that is for our Leyrat cognac. So if anybody is keen to find out a little bit more about cognac, they can come through to our four-way store. Outside of that, we've got a whole lot more tastings coming up, particularly from a wine perspective for September as we move into warmer weather. Both red and white, we're finding that certain people are still enjoying drinking red wine during the summer months. And that's just also a testament that there are no hard and fast rules when it comes to wine, that it's all about preference and it's all about what works for you.
Amongst those tastings, on the 12th of October, I will be, 12th of September, I'll be at the Four-Way store with Glen Carlo, so come and join me there and the Glen Carlo team, and 17th October with Kleinwood, amongst others. Almost at the end of what's been a fascinating hour, let's jump over quickly to the Mad Scientist. What are you cooking up for 2023, Izele? Are any of your top secret releases allowed to be public knowledge yet? And if so, what are you going to be giving us for this year? We've got you on mute again, Izele.
Don't worry, I've got that under control now. No, I knew you're going to ask that question now. It's so we launched our Nebbiolo. So we have a Nebbiolo from Stellenbosch, only 138 vines. And it spent 3 years in barrels and 2 years in bottle. But yeah, the next one is there. It's going to be very interesting. I'm excited because I think a lot of people are going to love it or they're not going to like it at all. But like always, it's like the Carmenère. Somewhere 95% of the people liked it and 5% didn't. And then the next varietal, 95 didn't like it and 5 liked it. But yeah, pushing the boundaries, understanding what we need to achieve with this brand. There's a lot more to come. I think challenging Spain, challenging Italy, challenging Argentina. Yeah, you can read between the lines. There's going to be a few interesting varietals joining the limited edition of the Mentors range. Yeah, watch this space.
It wouldn't be the Mentors if it wasn't an exciting and interesting range, and she wouldn't be Izele if she wasn't being cloak and dagger and full of intrigue about what's coming. We'll have her back on the show as soon as those wines are confirmed and released, purely because I want to taste them, and that justifies it enormously. Before we wrap up, I want to jump back to Siobhan. I did say at the start of the show I'd ask you for a little bit of advice. My understanding of the Greek wine industry is grown considerably over the last few years, spending time here, getting to meet the winemakers, meet people in the trade, understand what's working, how they're improving. And I think one of the things they've done really well is investing both in their own grapes and the belief therein, but also investing in the vineyards, investing in the cellars, and investing in the education of winemakers who are spending time abroad and coming back armed with this wealth of knowledge to then plow in to Greek wine production. You're starting to see flickers of Greek wine on wine lists around the world, but it's still very much the exception rather than the rule. As somebody who's overseen a challenging, but I think ultimately successful period for South African wine, what are 1 or 2 pointers you might give to the Greek wine industry, given that it sits on a curve that South Africa would have encountered a little while back?
Dan, it's actually quite interesting because I was talking about Greek wine today, and I had no idea you were going to mention it, and for the very same reasons you've mentioned. And I think they've done their homework. I think the biggest point is go out there with what your simplified messages are. So, if you're going to own a cultivar, go out there and talk about it, but be consistent in your message and be consistent about doing it over and over and over again, because it takes momentum, and it slowly builds up. It's taken us a good 10 years to get certain messages across, and you've got to keep doing it. So put your money where your mouth is, keep your message consistent, and don't think that a strategy is going to work in 1 or 2 years. It's going to take 5 to 10 years to roll out. But what I've seen of the Greek wine industry is that they are starting to get heard, and it's getting out there. And I think they're should I say, a wave that's starting to rise.
I think that's a very, very accurate summary of where they are. And it's a big reason I love coming to Greece every year, other than the beaches and the cocktails and the blue skies, is the fact that the wine, together with some incredible food, is just getting better and better and better. And therein lies the very strong parallel with South Africa, where wine is doing exactly the same thing. And all three of my guests on the show play an important part in that. Izele in making it, and Mbali in getting it out to people across South Africa, and Siobhan overseeing the rest of the world, discovering that South African wine really is the very best of the lot. Guys, to all of you, thank you so much for being part of the show. Lovely having you with us from three very different but very dynamic perspectives. Izele, good luck with your trip to Germany and drinking all of that wine selflessly. I know you're flying the South African flag very high indeed. Look after Edmund.
I'm joining you tonight on the plane, tomorrow night on the plane.
We'll wave somewhere over the...
When you come back,
somewhere in
I'm
South Sudan. I shall look out for you. And Mbali, we'll see you in a couple of weeks at
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you so much, Dan. It was amazing.
Being on the show. And Siobhan, to you and the Woza team, keep up the fantastic work. There are a few things that give me greater pride as I do just looking around this room and seeing South African bottles of wine, the knowing that our world-class produce is featuring in restaurants and on wine lists and in bottle stores all over the world. So big thank you to you and the Woza team for doing a fabulous job.
Thank
you. There we go. That is our Monday show. It's my last show from Greece. I'll be on a plane tomorrow and heading back to South Africa. Thursday's show, we catch up with the team from Wine Mag and we celebrate a number of the wines that have been recognized in the latest Wine Mag categories. Sauvignon Blanc Blend, I think, are amongst them. So look out for the team from Wine Mag and some special guests. I can't tell you who, or you'll know who's done really well. Those results are only being announced in the next day or two. Also look out next week. The Tim Hatkin report comes out. And on Wednesday, there is Nedbank Cape Winemakers Guild tasting. If you're at the atrium at Nedbank on Wednesday evening, come and say hello. Would love to meet you and have a glass of wine with you. That wraps us up for this evening. I'm heading upstairs where I have got a bottle of David and Nadia. Some, I think it's the Aristarchos I've got. Greek name, South African wine. Felt like a nice way to wrap up my final evening here in Athens. Have a great night. Look forward to seeing you either at the Cape Winemakers Guild at Nedbank on Wednesday or seeing you at Norman Goodfellows on the 12th of September with Glenn Carlo. Safe travels to Izele to Germany. And thanks very much to all of you for joining me on the show. This is Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Goodbye.